Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into the world of twisted bilayer graphene. You shared a paper with us recently, and it looks fascinating.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff.
So twisted bilayer graphene, or TBG for short, for anyone who needs a quick refresher, it's two layers of graphene stacked one on top of the other and then twisted at a specific angle. But what's so special about this twisting? Why is everyone so excited about it?
Well, the twist is really where all the magic happens. At a specific angle called the magic angle, which is about 1.08 degrees, something really cool happens. The interaction between the two layers creates what are called flat bands.
Flat bands. I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these flat bands.
Okay, so imagine you have electrons, right? And in normal materials, they're like cars speeding down a wide open highway. They can move quickly and independently, but in these flat bands, it's like those electrons suddenly hit a traffic jam. They're forced to slow down and interact with each other much more strongly. And this restriction of their movement actually enhances their interactions, which leads to all sorts of unusual and potentially useful quantum phenomena.
Okay, so we've got this magic angle and these electron traffic jams. But
Yeah.
this paper's looking at what happens when you start to move away from that magic angle. Like, what was the thought process there?
A lot of research has, of course, focused on TBG at that magic angle,
Yeah.
because of the fascinating phenomena it displays, correlated insulators, superconductivity, you name it. But this paper asks, what happens if we move away from the magic angle? Like, how does the electronic behavior change? It's kind of like asking, what happens when we adjust the tempo of this quantum dance?
Right, right. And how do they even do that? I mean, I can barely fold a piece of paper straight. How do they precisely twist these atoms?
Well, that's where some really incredible experimental advancements come in. Researchers have developed this amazing tool called the quantum twisting microscope. It allows them to actually control the twist angle with incredible precision.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like having nanoscale tweezers that can manipulate these graphene
So
sheets.
they're like DJs of the quantum world spinning those graphene sheets
Exactly.
and watching what happens on the dance floor. So what do they find?
Well, they found that as you twist the angle, you can actually trigger a phase transition, a fundamental change in the properties of the material.
Okay, wait, back up for a second. Phase transition. Is that like water turning into ice?
It is exactly like water turning into ice,
Mhm.
but instead of temperature driving the change, here it's the twist angle that's doing it. So they used simulations to actually observe this transition
Hmm.
from a correlated insulator to a Dirac semimetal.
Okay, so um, correlated insulator, we touched on that earlier, but just remind me what that means at the electron level.
So in a correlated insulator, the electrons are so tightly packed and they're interacting so strongly that they essentially become stuck. They can't move freely, so the material doesn't conduct electricity very well.
Gotcha. So like a traffic jam where no one is going anywhere.
Exactly.
Okay. And then what about the Dirac semimetal? Is that when the traffic clears up?
Yes, precisely. In a Dirac semimetal, the electrons are zipping around as if they have no mass. They can move freely and conduct electricity very effectively. It's like they hit the open highway.
Okay.
And what's amazing is this transition from gridlock to free flow is controlled entirely by how much you twist these graphene layers.
That's pretty incredible. Just by tweaking the twist angle,
Yeah,
they can completely change the material's electrical properties.
right.
But this is about more than just flipping a switch, right? Because the paper connects this to some pretty complex theoretical physics.
It does. What they might be seeing here is the first observation of something called a Gross-Neveu quantum critical point in a condensed matter system.
Whoa. Okay, big words. What does that actually mean? Why should we care about this?
So, the Gross-Neveu model is a theoretical concept that comes from high-energy physics, and it describes how massless particles can actually gain mass through their interactions. It's usually used to study things that are happening at super high energies, like, in particle accelerators, but they might have stumbled upon it in these twisted layers of graphene, which is pretty wild.
Wow. So they're seeing this thing that's usually reserved for particle physics
Right.
playing out in the material that we could hold in our hands.
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
That's amazing.
It is, and it could mean that we can study some of these fundamental high energy physics concepts in a much more accessible setting. Just by manipulating this twist angle in TBG, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities for understanding how our universe works at the most fundamental level.
So how did they actually observe this transition? Did they have to like meticulously twist those graphene layers, like bit by bit, and measure what happened?
It would be incredibly difficult to do that experimentally. So they actually turn to computer simulations,
Okay.
and they use a technique called quantum Monte Carlo, or QMC.
Quantum Monte Carlo. I'm assuming that's not some fancy casino in Monaco.
No, no, it's not. It's more like a virtual lab where you can simulate the behavior of quantum systems with incredible detail. Essentially, they created this digital model of the TBG, and then they virtually twisted the layers to see how the electrons would respond.
So they're running like a massive what-if scenario on a computer.
Exactly.
Like, what if we twisted a little more?
What if we twisted a little less, and then they see how those changes actually impact the behavior of the electrons in the system?
Wow. And what did these simulations reveal? Did they actually find this Gross-Neveu critical point?
They did. They actually pinpointed a specific critical angle of around 1.20 degrees. And at that point, the system is perfectly balanced between those two phases. The correlated insulator, where the electrons are frozen, and the Dirac semimetal, where they're zipping around freely. It's like finding that exact temperature where water turns into ice.
Wow. So it's like a quantum tipping point. At this critical angle, the slightest nudge could send the system one way or the other.
Exactly. It's a very delicate balance, and it's controlled entirely by how much you twist those cracking layers.
This is already a lot to take in, and we haven't even really talked about the potential implications of this research.
Right.
I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to twisted bilayer graphene.
Yeah, we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore in this material, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Well, before we go too far down the rabbit hole, let's just take a moment to kind of recap what we've learned so far. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground, from magic angles to quantum phase transitions, and I think it's important to make sure that we're all on the same page before we go any deeper.
Yeah, I agree. I think a recap is a good idea, especially with such mind-bending physics. So we've established that twisted bilayer graphene gives us this crazy level of control over how electrons behave. Like by just adjusting this twist angle, we can make it transition from a correlated insulator to a Dirac semimetal, which is something you don't see every day outside of like high energy physics labs.
And it's crazy that they figured all this out with simulations, like quantum Monte Carlo. They basically built a virtual universe where they can change the laws of physics with like a few keystrokes.
It's true. The precision you get with QMC simulations is remarkable. Like researchers can explore, all these different situations that'd be so hard or maybe even impossible to recreate in a real world lab.
So they're not actually like physically twisting the sheet. They're creating this computer model and using the simulations to kind of virtually play with the twist angle.
Exactly, yeah. And by doing that, they can see how the entire system changes. They can measure different properties, even pinpoint that critical angle where it flips between those phases.
It's like having a quantum microscope that you can use to look into the heart of matter and see all the electrons doing their thing.
Yeah, I like that. And it's not just, pictures, right? These simulations produce tons of data, and you can really analyze it, get some hard numbers about how it all behaves.
So they're not just watching the electrons move around. They're measuring their energy levels, their interactions, how those things change as they adjust the twist angle.
Exactly, yeah. And that data lets them double-check their theories and get a deeper understanding of what's really going on.
And in this case, that data points to a Gross-Neveu quantum critical point.
Right.
Which is like they found this hidden door between two worlds of physics, the world of condensed matter and the world of high energy particle physics.
It's amazing how these ideas are coming together. It makes you wonder about, how universal the laws of physics really are and how seemingly unrelated stuff can actually be connected.
So we got this magic angle, flat bands where the electrons are forced to interact, and now this connection to high energy physics. I can see why everyone's so excited about TBG.
It really makes you rethink physics, opens up so many new paths to explore. And as our tools get better, who knows what else we'll find in these twisted layers.
You mentioned earlier that this research could really impact future technology. What kind of applications are you most excited about?
Well, think about it. Being able to control a material's properties, like with such precision, that opens up a ton of possibilities, especially in electronics. Imagine a material you can switch between a conductor and an insulator just by twisting it.
That'd be a game changer. Like for transistors, the things that make modern electronics work, can we make like faster, more energy efficient stuff.
Absolutely. TBG could completely revolutionize how we design circuits. Smaller, faster, less power consumption.
And what about beyond electronics? I've heard people talking about TBG and quantum computers.
Oh, yeah, that's another exciting direction. Quantum computers use quantum mechanics to do calculations that regular computers can't even dream of. And TBG, because it can host these weird quantum states like superconductivity, could be really important for building those machines.
So we're talking about a material that could change our everyday devices and also help us make big scientific breakthroughs, solve problems we can't solve now.
The possibilities are pretty mind-blowing, and it all comes from the unique properties of this twisted two-dimensional material.
We've got to remember this is still like a new field. We're just getting started with PBG. Lots of challenges, lots of mysteries to
Right.
uncover.
For sure. That's what makes it so exciting, though. We're at the beginning of a scientific revolution, and TBG is leading the way.
And speaking of revolutions, before we dive deeper, maybe we should take stock of what we've learned so far. A lot of terms, a lot of ideas flying around. It's good to make sure we're all on the same page.
I agree. A little synthesis is always helpful, especially when we're talking about, such a complex topic. So far, we've seen that twisted bilayer graphene is this amazing material that can, do all sorts of things depending on how you twist it.
Right. We talked about the magic angle, flat bands, and how twisting can make it switch between a correlated insulator and a Dirac semimetal.
We also saw how researchers are using these powerful quantum Monte Carlo simulations to really study this stuff in detail. And they're learning about how electrons interact, how the twist angle matters, and how these exotic quantum states appear.
And we talked a bit about the implications of all this,
Yeah.
huge advancements in electronics, quantum computing, and even a better understanding of physics itself.
Yeah, we've covered a lot, but this is really just the beginning of what twisted bilayer graphene can offer.
And that's exactly what we'll be getting into next. We'll take a closer look at the details of this research, unpack some of the more complicated ideas, and talk about the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
So stick with us as we keep exploring the fascinating world of twisted bilayer graphene.
Okay, so let's jump back into this. Before the break, we were talking about all the potential of twisted bilayer graphene. You know how it's kind of pushing the limits of what we know about physics. But there's this one thing in the paper I wanted to go back to. They talk about a chiral phase transition. What's that all about?
Right. So chirality in physics basically refers to the handedness of a particle. Think about your hands, your left and right hand. They're mirror images, but you can't perfectly overlap them. Turns out electrons can also have this chirality, this handedness, and it affects how they, act and interact with other things.
Okay, so we've got these left-handed and right-handed electrons doing their thing in the TBG.
Well, not exactly visual like that, but yeah, you're getting the idea. The interesting thing is this phase transition we've been discussing, that shift from the insulator to the semimetal, it seems to involve a change in the chirality, the handedness of the electrons.
So the electrons are actually switching their handedness during this whole process.
That's what the research suggests, yeah. And this is where the connection to that Gross-Neveu model gets even more interesting.
Right, because the paper also mentions the Gross-Neveu universality class, which, I got to be honest, sounds pretty intimidating. What does that mean in the context of this research?
Think of it like categories, like in biology. We group animals together based on what they have in common. Same thing in physics. We classify different phenomena based on the principles behind them. The Gross-Neveu universality class, it describes a specific type of quantum phase transition, one where massless particles, those speedy electrons in the semimetal, can suddenly gain mass because of their interactions.
So it's not just that they're seeing this transition, but it's a specific type of transition, one that fits into this existing theoretical framework.
Exactly. It's like finding a new species, but it fits perfectly into a category we already know about. And what's even more exciting, this could be the first time we're actually seeing a Gross-Neveu quantum critical point, for real, in a material we can study.
So they're not just learning more about TBG, they're potentially changing our understanding of basic physics itself.
Yeah, potentially, which is one of the coolest things about twisted bilayer graphene. It lets us explore some really fundamental questions about matter, how different forces work together, even how it connects to the physics of the universe on a grand scale, all in a lab.
It's like having a window into the universe hidden in these little twisted sheets of carbon.
It is, and it shows how amazing human ingenuity can be. We've managed to make this material that lets us like fine tune how electrons behave, and it's leading to these incredible discoveries.
We've covered so much ground today, magic angles, chiral transitions. It's been a wild ride for sure. But as we wrap up, what's the one big thing you hope people listening take away from all this?
I'd say this. Twisted bilayer graphene. It's not just some material. It's a launch pad for discovery. It's a tool that lets us look deeper into the laws of the universe, test our theories, and maybe even find new stuff that could change technology, change how we understand the world around us.
Beautifully put. So next time you hear about graphene, remember, it's not just about, how strong it is or how well it conducts. It's about that twist that might hold the key to unlocking, well, who knows how many possibilities. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into twisted bilayer graphene.